You're listening to the Breakaway Wealth Podcast, the show that helps you build wealth faster, think outside the box, and break out of the herd. Here's your host, Jim Oliver.
Welcome back, Breakaway Wealth. I'm your host, Jim Oliver, and with me today, Avery Carl. Welcome, Avery. Gosh, that was, such an easy name, and the hard ones, it just flows out, and the easy ones just get stuck sometimes.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Yeah, you did just fine.
Hey, so before we get started, because there's a lot of stuff that I want to ask you about with where your specialty is and where your unique brilliance is, but just so everybody knows who you are and what we're going to talk about today, introduce yourself a little bit.
Sure. So my name's Avery Carl. I'm a real estate investor. I have several hundred doors across the country, multiple asset classes, but the first asset class, so the one that I started with and my favorite one, is short-term rentals. Started investing in those in 2015, so well before it was trendy to do that. And also the CEO and founder of the Short-Term Shop, which is the country's largest short-term rental specific brokerage. We're actually a team at EXP. I have to say that or I get in trouble. We've got offices in 20 of the top vacation markets. We've helped over 5,000 investors buy the right short-term rentals for them. I've got a book called Short-Term Rental, Long-Term Wealth. Came out a couple years ago. Got another one coming out in February on Bigger Pockets Publishing called Smarter STR, How to Out-Host Your Competition. And then I also have a podcast called The Short-Term Show. So that's the elevator pitch.
Awesome. So, it's funny is I'm up at my golf course, which is a quarter mile away from my house right before this. And they said, hey, you're going to go out and play golf? And I said, no, I'm recording at 12 or at 2:15. And they said, oh, what's the subject? And I said, she's an expert in short-term rental. Oh man, I'm glad I didn't get in that. I mean, they're just getting killed. So let's start there because, golf pros, they're not always the most adventurous people when it comes to thinking the way that we think, which is like buy assets and let the assets do the work for you. But isn't that a funny comment that somebody says, oh, since COVID, man, they're getting killed.
Anybody who says, I'm glad I didn't buy X in real estate has never been and never will be successful in real estate. The ones who are successful always say, I wish I would have bought X and I wish I would have bought it sooner.
Yeah. I'm with you. I bought some houses in Naples Park, which is a great short-term rental area because it's by the beach. And I bought 6 houses and the average was like 180 grand. Those are all worth 800 grand now. This is 14 years ago. I doubled my money and I sold them. And I thought, I know I'm killing. I mean, Robert Kiyosaki told me not to do this, right? Not to kill the goose that's laying the golden eggs. But I did anyway, because it was like, well, the market's going to correct. This is going to happen. And so I wish I would have bought 100 of them back then.
Right.
And my background would look a little different now. No, all right. So tell us, how did you get into this? I mean, how did you get into real estate? What did you do? Did you ever have a 9-to-5? All of that?
Yeah. Oh, yes, I did. So I started out, I graduated from undergrad in the worst time to ever graduate and be able to find a job, spring of 2009. Graduated from University of Texas. There were no jobs, Great Recession. So I was touring in punk rock bands at the time as a guitar player. So I just kept that up and bartended for several years. That got to do all the fun stuff all over the world while there were no jobs. Ended that part of my life living in New York City for a few years, met my husband there. We moved to Nashville in 2013. This is back before Nashville was crazy, back when it was still cheap and the entirety of California had not moved in yet. And our real estate agent was really trying to get us to buy in this really hip, fast appreciating part of Nashville called East Nashville. And we were like, no, we just came from Brooklyn. We're done with neighbors. We're in Tennessee. We want to be out in the country. So we bought a house out in the country and went back, got my master's, got what I thought was my dream job, working on the business side of the music business in marketing. And my husband and I had just like a little bit of money saved up, like 10 grand. And we thought, oh, we finally got, a little bit ahead. What can we do with this? Let's make sure we're smart with this. And so we went to a financial advisor. And we went to a Raymond James it was just like it was the office like in the same building as my office. And so we didn't know what we were doing. We read Dave Ramsey and stuff back then. And so we went in there and she told us that we basically didn't have enough money for her to bother with. And so we felt like a-holes and walked out. And we're like, well, there's got to be something we can do, right? Just because we don't have $1 million to invest, let's figure it out. And so we kind of went back to the real estate thing and thought, well, those houses are appreciating that fast. What if we bought one of those, made a down payment on one of those, put a renter in it, and let them pay the bills. And in 25 years, when our future kids need to go to college, maybe that appreciation will pay for that and we won't have to come out of pocket. We thought we were these geniuses. So we did buy a house in just outside of East Nashville in Madison, Tennessee for $122,000, put 15% down. That house, the mortgage was $647 a month, and we rented it for $1,500 a month. So it was great cash flow for a long-term rental. Coincidentally, that's about how much I was making at my quote dream job, because the music business pays nothing every month. I was making about $1,000 a month after, all the expenses came out, the deductions and things. And we thought, wow, this house is making as much money as me spending my entire day at an office. We need more of these. So then we started actually educating ourselves on real estate investing and how to do it. And so we had another real small down payment, and we said, okay, well, what can we buy now? Let's be a little more strategic this time. What can we buy that's going to make us the most amount of money, the fastest, so we can go buy more? And we landed on short-term rentals. This was 2015. So they were very established at that point, and but not the 2020 level. And we did not want to buy something in Nashville, because even back then, the city was just very anti short-term rental, and we could not afford to buy something and be told in 2 years we can't do it. So we just been on vacation to the Smoky Mountains in Tennessee, 4 hours away. We stayed in cabins. Everybody else that we were with stayed in cabins. And we thought, well, somebody owns those cabins, so why can't that be us? They were in our price range, and there were no YouTube videos. There were no courses. There were no gurus. There were no people you could pay to teach you how to do this back then. And we bought one, and we just figured out how to self-manage it from Nashville, because at the time, the average property management split in short-term, at least in that market, was 40% of your gross. So we said, no, wait a minute. We need that 40% to go buy more properties. So that first one did really well. We were able to scale 1 to 5 in the Smokies over the course of about 18 months. And the rest is a little bit history. So didn't say, oh, you know what, I'm going to be a short-term rental investor. I'd also like to differentiate between short-term rentals and vacation rentals. I invest in vacation rentals. So these are vacation markets, beach, mountain markets, areas that are all short-term rentals. Have always been short-term rentals since before the internet even existed. So outside of Destin, Florida, where I live, has been only vacation rentals. Like my grandmother used to come here in the 30s and rent beach houses. So I focus on those types of areas, and not, I think where people really kind of got themselves, well, there's several types of investors that got themselves in trouble, like your golf pro might have been worried about. People who had maybe long-term rentals or bought in a like a suburb or a medium-sized metro where they're, I'm doing all right in long terms, but let me turn it to a short term and make more money. That's not very strategic. And that, a lot of people ended up converting back, because, like where I invest in long terms is entirely different than where I choose to invest in short terms. So most people got their asses handed to them. And then also a lot of people bought in 2020 that were not real estate investors. In 2021, they just heard 2% mortgage rates and said, oh man, I've always wanted to own a beach house. The mortgage payment will be how much? Yeah, sign me up. I'll just slap it up on Airbnb when I'm not using it. And then they expect to be successful that way and not treating it like the business that it is. Anyway, I'll let you ask a question now.
No, I love that, because there's a lot of questions in there, but I got to go back to the punk rock thing. So, growing up in LA, it was like the punk rock central back in the late 70s and early 80s. And, Black Flag. I mean, we had the Whiskey, the concerts that I went to at the Whiskey A Go-Go are amazing. But we would go and we would see bands, like it would be like a church basement, and there'd be like 7 people there, and it would be some punk band. So you're bringing back a lot of memories. My next door neighbors, for a time, they started a band that maybe you've heard of, maybe you haven't. They're actually more successful than I ever imagined, but it was called Red Cross. Have you ever heard of that?
That is so Such a small world. So
Yeah,
I did not tour with Red Cross, but we did tour with Circle Jerks, who had a lot of the same members that
yeah,
were in Red
I
Cross.
remember
So
certain
Greg
things. Yeah.
Hetson, Keith Morrison, all those guys. Yes. So I toured with
So
those guys when I was 17.
yeah, Jeff and Stephen McDonald, their dad was really into motocross. These kids were musicians, and I have no musical talent whatsoever. So their dad was like, "You want to ride the motor? You want to ride the motorcycle?" Because they're not going to. And I was like, "Hell yeah!" So anyway, all right, back to. I love what you said about distinguishing those markets because you couldn't have said it any better. I think that's exactly the problem. Is I live in a vacation area. There's short-term rentals. There's always been short-term rentals. Lots of Florida, always been that way, right?
Hmm.
And so it's not. There's no way they're going to get rid of short-term rentals. There's no way that. I've been a Nashville investor in short-term rentals, and that's why I have my eyes closed. And I didn't lose money, but I didn't make the money that I thought I was going to make. And so, but you know what? It's like I was talking to somebody today, this lady who's a doctor, and she's really into holistic health and medicine. And she's like, nobody wants to take responsibility for themselves, right? Nobody wants to do what you did, which is educate yourself, figure out where your niche is. Not just hand it to the Raymond James person or the Edward Jones person and say, all right, I hope you go make me some money. I mean, I don't think our lives are designed to be that way. And so I really appreciate what you said about that. So tell me what you do now. How do you help people learn how to do this? Or do you partner with them? Or do you syndicate? Tell me about that.
Yeah. So we work as real estate agents. So that's, the way that we get paid. But what we do for all of our buyer clients is we teach them all how to self-manage remotely. So, most, I would say 99% of successful vacation rental investors don't live in the place where they're investing. A lot of them live in, the big cities in the US, and they're investing in these smaller towns that just happen to be big vacation destinations. So these are not areas that, a lot of people live. So for example, here where I live, there's something on my camera. There's only 10,000 of us that live here full time. So
Yeah.
what we do is we teach all of our clients, once we help them find the right property, teach them how to self-manage. A lot of people out there charge like $15,000, even more. Like that's a minimum for you to sign up for their course. So we teach all of our buyer clients how to do that for free. And the goal of that is that we make them so successful on their first one, they come back and buy more with us. So, we don't gatekeep that information. Like if you're working with one of our agents, we're going to make sure you're doing this right because, we don't want anybody to fail. So that's what we do. We don't syndicate. We don't partner with anybody, anything like that. We just kind of, teach them to fish, so to speak.
No, I love that. Again, I think success I think there's patterns, right? If you find somebody that has what you want and you say, okay, if you're sitting there and you're working as a doctor, you're working as an engineer, you're working as a salesperson, and you don't really like your job and you think, okay, I want to do what Avery did and I want to get into short-term rental and I want to be able to evaluate and analyze the deal. And I want to learn all those things, not the hard way, but with somebody like a mentor or a coach, whatever label you want to put on that person. Then find somebody who's got what you want, that's figured it out, and pay them to help you. It's going to be way cheaper than making a few mistakes. So talk about that. Like, how do you analyze a short-term rental deal in those vacation markets versus just a multifamily, or maybe not even a multifamily, maybe a single family home in Iowa?
It's very different. So whether it's a multifamily or single family long-term, those fit really nicely into spreadsheets because the income is the same. The gross income anyway, is the same every single month until that lease is up, which could be 1 year, could be 3 years, whatever specified time. So the income is going to be the same. Whereas short-term rentals, it's very, very subjective. You've got seasonality to deal with. You've also got, you and I could own the exact same short-term rental and have it decorated the exact same way and make different incomes just based on the style of management that we use. So it's very subjective. There's a lot of great data sources, like AirDNA is one, Rabu is another, Price Labs, that help you see how much properties can make. You're not looking at the actual income of the property that you're looking at necessarily, but you're looking at, you can see what all 4 bedrooms in the market make, things like that. But what you kind of have to do, because you can't really look at only the numbers when it comes to short-term rental investing. You have to look at things like amenities and room for improvement and just types of properties. So not all 1 bedrooms are created equal. Some of them are going to have a view. Some of them are not. Some of them are going to be, in the right location. Some of them might have a better view, but be a little bit further away from everything. So there's all these little things you have to kind of take into account. And we call it the enemy method, which is basically just kind of a competitive analysis. So you take your data, look at a few data sources, come up with a range of what you think. Let's say you're looking for a 4-bedroom, of what 4 bedrooms in that market should be able to make. And then when you find a property that you think you want to make an offer on, you're going to go on Airbnb and Vrbo, which are the places that you post your short-term rentals for rent, and look at your neighbors and see what the differences and similarities are between your property and theirs. And, basically, to put it at its simplest, what your property has or what you can put in your property to make guests choose your property instead of the neighbors. And, maybe there's things that can't be changed. So I've always said I would much rather buy, and this is kind of how you have to do it now, the worst property in the best location, rather than trying to find like the best, most turnkey, like most beautiful property you've ever found. I would prefer, you can fix up a property, but you can't fix the location. It is where it is. So anyway, look at the data, use the enemy method.
No, I love that. I love that enemy method. That's very cool. And so, all right, so you bought, and I totally agree with, I've bought the best house in the worst neighborhood, and I bought the worst house in the best neighborhood in the area. And I can tell you're exactly right. Don't ever do it because you're tempted. Right?
Yeah, because the numbers will look great always on the best house in the worst neighborhood. And I mean, I can always tell when somebody is a fairly new investor, because they'll be like, no, it's all numbers. It's only numbers. That's all that matters. I'm like, you hadn't had somebody, you haven't been in there for long enough, because things can happen outside of your control sometimes that aren't necessarily going to be reflected in the numbers.
Absolutely. Yeah. It is funny. Typically speaking in absolutes, when it comes to investing in real estate or buying businesses or doing hard money loans or anything like that, absolutes are normally a bad idea to speak in, right? Always and never.
Right.
They tell you that in counseling, not to with your partner, not to ever say always and never. You never take out the trash. Well, I did last week. So I'm just kidding. All right. So you coach people, you teach them how to do it. They kind of do it. And then, that to me, I always tell people, and I've used, we teach people how to use infinite banking, take over the banking function, and then go buy cash flowing assets. And there are people that we work with, Avery, and they go, I know exactly what to do with this money. Exactly what to do. And you would know, right? If I said, okay, you're going to put $1 million in your banking system, and then you get to borrow the insurance company's $1 million and go put it in motion. You'd say, I know exactly what I'm going to do with the insurance company's money. But a lot of people don't. And so one of the purposes of that we have for this show is to show people, maybe it's short-term rentals, maybe it's hard money lending, maybe it's passive because that's just your personality or where you're at in life. And so I love giving people kind of opportunity to explore. So how would somebody find you? Like website, Instagram. I'm an old guy, so if it's TikTok or whatever it is, let me know.
I'm just a little old for TikTok myself. So website is theshorttermshop.com, Instagram @theshorttermshop, or YouTube, youtube.com/theshorttermshop.
I forgot YouTube. YouTube, there's so much stuff on YouTube. It's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right, along the way, you had to get some great advice. And I really like your background because, one, we talked about your album covers there in your bookshelf. And then I didn't know about the punk rock part of it. So tell me, what's the best advice anybody's ever given you?
Okay, I may have two on this one.
Yeah,
But
perfect.
okay. The first one I read, I can't remember what book it was in, is the rotten fruit will fall down by itself. So, if somebody's doing something wrong, you don't have to help them fall down. They're going to on their own. It's not your job to get involved. It's not your job to get involved. It's not your job to knock them down.
Right.
Number two, this one's a little more punk rock. My grandfather used to tell me that if you call 3 people an asshole, you're probably the asshole.
I love that. I love that. That's a great one.
Yeah. So, if everything's always everybody else's fault, you're the common denominator there.
There's a lot of truth in that, Grandpa. All right. So the last question, Avery, is if God came down from heaven and only allowed you to retain the knowledge that you've received from one book, and you have some great books behind you because, when we record, the audience wouldn't know this. They're going to see Avery in perfect video. But when you record in Riverside, I don't see her very clearly. And so then when I do, because it pops in and out, when I do, I go, oh, good to great, traction. I start to read your books there, the titles. So if God came down and only allowed you to receive the knowledge that you've received from one book that you've read, what would that book be?
48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene.
Love it. Love it. Talk about the book for people who haven't heard about it.
Yeah, so it's definitely, it's hard to get through. It's very long, so it's not something that you're going to sit down and read like a novel, but it's organized into 48 chapters. Each chapter is a law of power on how to keep power, how to get power. And each chapter is examples from history and different leaders or rulers or parables of how to use this law. So, I think law number 1 is like never outshine the master. Okay. That makes sense. Like don't go crazy and make your boss look smaller than you, stay on your stay on your level, stay on your lane. So a lot of different laws like that. But I mean, I think, it could have been the rotten fruit falls down by itself. There might be a version of that in 48 Laws of Power. Anyway, all good, just like sound advice on, dealing with other people.
Yeah. I mean, I love that. I read a lot. And when I was a kid, I hated school, but I loved to learn. And once I figured out that I could learn whatever I wanted to, and I get to choose the curriculum, and I started looking at personal development books, you start to see a pattern of and it's like, this person says it this way. It's kind of like business. You do it this way. Somebody might have a variation, which I think is smart, that you don't go, okay, here's exactly the cookie cutter way that you do it, and boom. And then when they're not inside that cookie cutter, then you go, well, I don't know what to tell you to do. That's how we did it. So good luck. Thanks for the 10 grand or whatever. So it's like, I mean, you know what I'm talking about. There are a lot of gurus out there that's how they operate.
Oh, yeah.
So I like that you are adaptable, and obviously with your music background and everything else, that totally makes sense to me.
Mm-hmm. Slept on a lot of van floors in my lifetime.
Yeah, I bet. So, the other thing that as I get older, that I am getting more in tune with is that what I would have called voodoo in my 30s, I'm like, oh, that makes sense. Like heart math or heart rate variance, or like that energy that we could heal anything inside of our bodies, that, like that stuff. And I think when I think of, 48 laws, it's like when you put that stuff in your brain, it changes your brain. It changes your mindset. It changes your thinking. Somebody will say something like, oh, that person's an asshole. And you go, oh, well, the 3 assholes, maybe they're the asshole, right? And so, you know what I mean? Like, that's why we got to continually feed our minds so that we continue to develop our mindset and our mentality of success and abundance. So thank you so much for being on. You shared some great things. I love your background.
Thanks.
And so what we can do is do a workshop or something like that in the future and get some people on and like, okay, hey, I really want to do this. Help me, right?
Sure.
Because sometimes people just won't make that call. But I would encourage everybody. It'll be in the show notes, how to get a hold of Avery, how to find her. Go watch her stuff. See if you guys resonate and if you guys have a good connection. And then, call or reach out to her team and see if this is right for you. Because the only thing that's limiting you is you and your thinking. And we're going to end this, Avery, like we always wrap up every show with the incredible words of Earl Nightingale and The Strangest Secret. So take it away, Earl.
Here's the key to success and the key to failure. We become what we think about. Now let me say that again. We become what we think about.
Thanks for listening to the Breakaway Wealth Podcast. Be sure to subscribe to this show wherever you're listening so you never miss an episode. If you want to start increasing your wealth building ability right now, go to community.createtailwind.com to join our free online community and get access to free, in-depth training designed to help you build real, lasting wealth. See you next week.